ReefDudes is sponsored by Ecotech Marine and Bulk Reef Supply.
Today, we're talking about how to upgrade or replace a reef tank in the same location. What's going on, guys? Devin from ReefDudes. Now, I often get asked, how do you upgrade a reef tank when it's in the same spot? If you're replacing it, you're upgrading it, if it's somewhere new, really easy, set up the new tank, transfer your stuff. But when it's in the same location, that is a logistical hurdle. And recently I ran into that same hurdle. We were looking at replacing our flooring and swapping the carpet out for probably like a waterproof vinyl flooring type of thing. And I've been thinking to myself, how the heck am I going to deal with it? Well, that led me to pick up one of these giant trough tanks. And this baby is a 150-gallon stock tank. So it's often used for like horses and stuff. Sometimes people use them as ponds, cold plunges and whatnot. Currently this is being used as a makeshift ball pit for my kid until I actually need it. But when the time comes, this is going to be my temporary tank. Now this thing's about 4 feet wide by roughly 5 feet long. So this is actually a really big surface area. They did have smaller ones that were 100 gallons and 3 feet wide, but I figured I'd just go bigger, make sure there's tons of space to fit all the rock, all the corals in here during transition time. Now, I absolutely love reef tanks. They're one of my favorite things, and it would suck not having one in my life. But that being said, the worst part of having one is having to deal with moving it. I've been stressing out the last few weeks trying to come up with a game plan of how I'm going to temporarily move this. Salt water weighs about 8.5 pounds per gallon. We're pushing 200 something gallons, 220 gallons, whatever the sump in the tank. So it's a lot of weight. And, where am I going to fit it all? Where am I going to put my rock and my coral so that, everything survives the transition? So, which led me to pick up this giant stock tank. So I'm pretty stoked for this. I think this is going to be a great solution. I can put it, downstairs, or, maybe I'll put it down in the entranceway or somewhere, or in the kitchen somewhere, but I'll find a spot where it can live during the transition. And I'll be able to use something like a pump to pump all the water into it, fill it up. I'll probably do about 50% fresh water and about 50% tank water. And then it'll be like a big water change, and it'll allow me to move all of my coral, all my fish and everything in there. They're probably going to live in there for a week or two, however long it takes to redo the flooring. And obviously I got to do the floor under the tank, so that is a logistical hurdle. And it's going to suck to move it, but at least it's going to take away the panic. You can move in your fish, your rock, the power heads, and basically have flow throughout the tank. I could probably slap the MP60s on, but I have an MP or a Nero 7. I'll probably put the jars on there. I'll do a bunch of different normal pumps to have flow throughout it. And I was actually debating on lighting. I might just take, maybe 2 radions, and I'll just make a little 2x4 frame above it so that it'll be like a temporary tank. And when this comes to do it, I'll do some clips on that as well. But right now we're kind of in the planning stage, just kind of thinking out how we are actually going to transition the tank and move things. Now, one silver lining is I'm sure my sand bed is super nasty from all the places I can never clean. So I think I'm actually going to completely clean out the sand. I might keep, a couple cups of old sand, but I'm probably going to take all my sand and put into some 5-gallon buckets or Rubbermaids and just really rinse out the garden hose, get rid of all that kitty litter mess, and basically turn it back into new sand again. And I think that's going to help with a lot of the nutrients in my system. Coral-wise, I'm not sure if I'm going to bother with the calcium reactor on the temporary setup. I'll probably just deal with dosing for it. Should be able to move over the Apex and the Trident on there, so it can still test and still make sure stuff is, relatively stable parameters while it's in its temporary home. But logistically, it's definitely a hurdle, especially when your tank is on your carpet or your flooring, whatever you're replacing, because again, you got to move it to replace it. You could go around it and you could patch it later, but I'd rather just take this opportunity to just do it all at once and, kind of redo it and, probably redo the stairs too. So it's going to be a lot of work. So the tank's going to have to live somewhere temporary for a few weeks. And honestly, this is the best solution I could come up with one of these stock tanks. It is, a really easy way. It holds a lot of water. This was normally, I think, 280 Canadian on sale for $199, so 200 bucks. So probably a bit cheaper for you guys in the US. And this one is Little Giant. Way cheaper than the Rubbermaid brand for basically the same thing. And if you have kids, makes a great ball pit in the meantime. So I'm curious, have you upgraded a tank in place? What did you do? What was your process? I've been trying to figure this out for a little while, what my plan of action is, and I think the stock tank is going to be the answer. I'm going to start rally up all my power heads, I have the Orbit, I have an Orbit 2 and Orbit 4 and Euro 7. I think those are all going to go inside there. I think that will do the job for flow for, you know, the week or two that it takes to redo all the flooring. So hopefully. Aside of that, yes, you still need to think about dosing. If you have lots of coral, yes, you still have to think about lighting. So, you know, putting the doser on there, quick, easy fix. As for lighting, again, I'll probably take 2 of my lights and just build a quick little 2x4 frame to hold it above it. That should be enough to light the tank and kind of keep the corals happy for now. It's also be a really good time to deep clean the tank, deep clean the sump. When we come down below, you see like all these little feather dustery type things, all those little tiny crustaceans all over the sump. You know, there's all this loveliness that has been caked on here after years and years and years. And coralline, so this is also going to be a really great opportunity to, you know, take the tank and run citric acid through it and clean it really, really well. You know, even all the stuff, you know, like caked on the overflow, like I'm probably going to chisel that off and, you know, even citric acid the tank and really clean it. You know, come up here, taking a look at the overflow teeth, look at all that, you know, coralline built up. You know, I'm sure the plumbing's nasty, so giving it a chance to give it a super good flush out, clean out is probably going to be something that's going to help prevent some like old tank syndrome and other potential issues down the road. You know, I'm going to guess that my plumbing is probably, you know, has a bunch of tube worms and other stuff in it that's restricting the flow. You know, and after 5 years, a lot of growth can happen in there. So having a way to clean this out is probably a good thing. Now, I'm not looking forward to this work. This is going to be a ton of work. Moving the tank's going to suck. Moving all the fish out's going to suck. Moving all the rock out's going to suck. But at the end of the day, once I got new floors, the tank will basically be brand new again. It'll be pretty darn sweet. So that part's going to be nice. So if you're going through all the work of moving it, I feel like it's a really good opportunity to, you know, deep clean your system, you know, make your tank basically new again and kind of almost like reset things a little bit. Also, again, it's going to be a good opportunity to hack up some of the coral and be a little picky of what goes back into the tank. You know, there's lots of these bigger colonies. I'm just going to break off some and put back in a minimal amount and just kind of thin out the tank a bit. You know, coming down, looking down some of this stuff, like there's basically no room in between stuff. Corals are growing between corals and they're just kind of finding little gaps between it. So it is going to be a really good excuse. And I know I keep talking about it, but this is probably going to be the time it actually happens. You know, this big island, I love my overhang, but I am done with those minty zoas. So again, I'm probably going to change this whole rock or maybe break off the ledge and build a new one or something on it. But all the bits of fun of considerations. So hopefully this gives you guys a bit of a idea or plan of action on how to upgrade your tank in place or replace a tank. You know, maybe you want to change out your stand. What do you do with your tank in the meantime? You know, or maybe you have a 4-foot tank and you want to upgrade to a 5 or 6 foot tank. And if it's going that same spot, that is definitely a logistical hurdle. And this is where, you know, I think finding yourself a really big temporary tank like the stock tank is a really wicked way to go. And once you finish migrating the tank, you have yourself a little mini swimming pool or a cold plunge or a koi pond or a lot of coral space. But either way, I think it's a great solution. So hopefully this helps some of you guys. As always, if you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. If you got any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll catch you guys on the next video.